So if you're dealing with a toxic person, you need to be really confident that they're toxic. You need to lean on your own ability to evaluate their toxicity. Hello, and welcome to the YouTube channel. My name is Louise, and I'm the founder and CEO of Empowerment Through Thought. This channel and Empowerment Through Thought in general is dedicated to people trying to overcome toxic people in their own lives. Now, we just finished up season 1. We were exploring the question, am I the toxic one? Now, that season, we've got a whole bunch of videos. We've got 4 videos up, so go check that out if any of that stuff is interesting to you. We're going to start season 2 on March 1st. So in season 2, we're going to be covering the question, what are things you can do in order to protect yourself against toxic people? But between season 1 and season 2, I'm going to be releasing some more videos. They're going to be shorter videos, and I'm going to be trying to play with my editing skills and all that kind of stuff. So if you have any feedback for me, you like some of the stuff I'm doing in this video, you hate some of the stuff I'm doing in this video, please comment below and let me know those things, because together we can try to make this thing a bit better. So in this video, we're going to be talking about 10 different things you might not know about toxic people. Toxic people often go completely undetected by others. Now, this one can be really frustrating for those of us who understand that we're dealing with these toxic people. But part of the troubles that toxic people face is centered around they're constantly trying to look like they're not toxic, right? A lot of what they're doing is trying to focus on how they look, right? So their whole game, the whole thing that they're doing is to try to look like they aren't toxic. So some of them are more successful than others at that. And the result is that lots of them go undetected. And this causes us harm if we're trying and we're interested in other people agreeing with us that this person is toxic. So if you're dealing with a toxic person, you need to be really confident that they're toxic. You need to lean on your own ability to evaluate their toxicity, right? You don't want to rely on others to agree with you, because the truth is toxic people are good at not looking toxic. That's part of their show. Okay, number 2. Toxic people are usually completely uninterested or incapable of working on themselves. Now, this one makes a lot of sense. If the toxic person in your life is trying to build this narrative where they're perfect, where everything is great, there are no problems for them. The problems are always other people. That usually means they can't look critically inward and start to identify places where they could maybe improve. Toxic people are often not able to tolerate criticism, so they can't be critical of themselves. In order to work on yourself, in order to try to improve, you have to be willing to say, hey, I didn't do as good as I could have in that situation. I've got to try to be better. Right? Toxic people aren't into that. That's not their jam, so usually they're the kind of person that's not going to work on themselves. Okay, number 3. All of us sometimes engage in toxic behavior, but toxic people take that to a whole different level. Now, we're human beings, right? And sometimes human beings do stuff that's not great. We might be a little bit manipulative towards our friends, or we might do a little toxic thing here or there. And that's part of being a human. And, that's part of the fact that none of us are perfect, right? We've all got these flaws. But toxic people are taking that way to a different level. Right? These are folks who do so much toxic behaviors that they don't even notice that they're doing it anymore. So they get into the cycle where they're doing these behaviors, they're getting the goals that they want for themselves. And then that feeds into doing progressively more toxic, more extreme behaviors. And then they've completely left the realm of how most people function. Okay, so number 4. Toxic people can often be high-powered and successful individuals. Now, depending on how you understand our most recent ex-president here in the United States, this might be an example of this kind of thing. But these are folks who can do, good things in terms of their careers, right? Just because you're toxic, just because you're not the best person doesn't mean that you can't succeed at being a good accountant or, being a business owner or those kinds of things. I think in general, there's going to be some challenges for toxic people in their career spaces, but they can definitely be successful depending on how, that success is measured, whether it's an income or whether it's a particular role that they're after in a business setting. So these folks might not have a good quality of life, right? They might have money, but they don't have a good quality of life. Being a toxic person basically means you can't have a very good quality of life unless you're actively getting a lot of support from mental health providers and that kind of thing. But toxic people certainly can have elements of success. They can be powerful. They can be successful in certain arenas. Okay, number 5, toxic people often attract other toxic people. Now, don't get confused. Just because you were attracted to a toxic person, let's say that the toxic person in your life was, you're in a romantic relationship with them, that does not mean that you are necessarily toxic. You can go check out all the stuff from season 1 to clarify your thinking on that one. But it is the case that toxic people often come together with other toxic people. They're often attracted to each other. A very classic case of this is someone who has narcissistic personality disorder pairing up with somebody who has borderline personality disorder. So the narcissist wants everyone to tell them how great they are, how perfect they are, how wonderful they are. And then a person with borderline personality disorder, a typical thing for people with this kind of personality disorder is they cycle between pedestaling people, saying these people are wonderful, these people are great, everything about them is the best, and then demonizing people. So taking that same person and saying they're the worst, I hate them, everything about them is bad. And people with borderline personality disorder will often kind of cycle kind of quickly between these. But you can see how a narcissist, at least some of the time, is going to love what somebody with borderline personality disorder is doing. They're going to love hearing that they're the best, that they're wonderful. When they're on the pedestaling side of that person's going to really feed their supply, right? That person's really going to help the narcissist get the things that they think they want and need. So you can see it's pretty natural here for someone with narcissistic personality disorder to pair up with somebody with borderline personality disorder. That's not the only example. You will often find that there's multiple people who have narcissistic personality disorder that are kind of being friends. Sometimes that doesn't happen because, right, sometimes we perceive people who are too similar to us to be a threat, and then we don't want them in our lives. But sometimes they definitely do come in sets. So if you start to see that somebody is toxic and then you start to notice that, like, oh, well, I actually kind of think like these people around them might have a similar thing, you could definitely be onto something. Don't let the statistics about there are only this many people with this kind of personality disorder distract you. Number 6, toxic people love to control people around them. Now, this one makes sense if you think about how fragile the narrative that toxic people create. Right. These folks are trying to get everyone around them to think that they are perfect. They are great. Everything is wonderful. But the truth is they're not so great, right? There's all these problems with that kind of story. So one way that toxic people manage the fragility of that is they try to make sure that all of the people around them, all of the people that are close enough to see that there are big problems with the story that they're pushing, that those people don't do anything that might threaten that fragile narrative, right? The best way to do that is to control them, is to make sure that they don't actively do anything, that they aren't feeling empowered enough to say like, hey, you think you're great, but you're not great, right? So they try to control it, do all of these different psychologically manipulative tactics in order to make sure that people around them don't do that kind of thing. Okay, number 7, if you were raised by a toxic person, hey, me too, it may take decades into adulthood for you to really realize the full extent of that damage. Now, this is a little bit difficult to accept, but the truth is when we're kids, our natural thought is that we have a good home, that our mom and dad are trying to do the best that they can for us, that the things that we're around are normal and good. And because of that disposition, which is a beautiful, wonderful thing about kids, like we shouldn't hate on that disposition. But the truth is, things aren't always as good as they seem when we're a kid. And maybe by the time we're a teenager, we're kind of starting to figure out like, okay, this isn't quite rolling the way that I thought it would. But it really takes some time and some distance to get away from that space to really realize the extent of the harm caused to you when you were a child by these toxic people. So the good news is you can overcome it. You can work through it. It's just going to take some time. It's perhaps a bit more difficult if you came from an environment with toxic parents versus having a relationship, like a romantic relationship with a toxic person. They are different. It's not that one is like better or worse than the other, but there's definitely a big time commitment you're gonna have to put in if you want to do that work and you want to heal from having toxic parents. Okay, number 8. Not everyone thinks that people become toxic because of their own traumatic experiences. So one thought that's around is like, oh, well, I have depression or I have these like mental health issues because of things that happened to me in the past. I am a product of the traumatic experiences from my past. And there's a lot of pushback from experts in psychology. There's definitely some pushback in philosophy on this kind of, we would call it deterministic thinking, where you just are a product of the things in the past and you cannot choose to do otherwise. There are a lot of people working on kind of personality disorders and these issues that think, well, those traumatic experiences in the past might contribute to any individual becoming, having these kind of mental health issues. However, there's this more popular thought that like maybe they didn't just become like this because of those things in the past. They actually made choices along the way that brought them to this place. So this is really important if we're trying to take on maybe more mistreatment or more abuse from toxic people than we really should be taking on, right? Because we often justify that and say like, oh, well, they just had a bad, childhood, or they just had a really rough life and that's why they're like that and I'm okay, I can take it. Like, don't let yourself get to those places, because there's at least some discussion about how for some mental health issues, not all, but for some of them, these people are not just a product of what happened to them. They've actively made choices to get to the place that they are today. Okay, number 9, toxic people often care more about how others perceive them than they actually care about how they treat others in their lives. Right. So this is where, the toxic person's built this narrative that they are perfect, that they are kind, right? They want to do things that make others understand that they are kind, right? They might donate to charity or they might volunteer in an event, right? Because they want their friends, they want the people around them to believe that they're kind. But then when it comes to being at home behind closed doors, they do not act kind. They do these things that obviously contradict this narrative that they are kind or that they are good or that they are perfect. For a lot of us who are not toxic, we would be disturbed by that contradiction, right? We would be disturbed that like I say I'm kind, but then, I treat my dog like crap or like whatever it is, right? So toxic people don't have that. They don't tend to feel anxious or upset that there's this contradiction. They are basically fine with it because what they care more about a lot of the time is how they appear and not how they actually treat other people. The last one, number 10, you can overcome the damage caused by toxic people in your own life. You can definitely do it. You do not have to live in the chaos of toxicity for the rest of your life. You might need to get some support in order to get there. Some kinds of support are mental health professionals. They can help you with certain kinds of things. You might take out support from a coach, or maybe from a coach like me. I'm a philosophical coach. So I specifically help people work on overcoming brain fog, right? When you deal with toxic people, they have to make you like feel kind of hazy. You're not sure what's right and what's wrong anymore. I help people work through that using the tools of reason. And I help people try to navigate the ethical issues that toxic people bring up, right? Like, how do you make a choice to go against your parents? Or how do you understand the way one person mistreated another? Those are ethical concerns, and that's a part of philosophy. So if you're interested in working with me in particular, you can go to my website, empowermentthroughthought.com. You can get a free 15-minute consultation. But of course, if you don't want to work with me, that's totally fine. I just really encourage you to get some support from whatever it is. If it's a clergy, like a church member that you're comfortable with, if it's somebody you know from school, if it's a mental health provider, whatever it is, I strongly encourage you to get support because you can heal from this so much faster if you aren't trying to navigate it alone. So thank you so much for spending some time with me. You can be on the lookout. We're still going to have videos coming out each week, and be sure to give us a like and hit subscribe if you want to see more from me. Thanks so much for spending time with me. Bye.